Sunday afternoon. I know it's beautiful outside to be outside, so we'll just very grateful that everybody's here with us today. There is a sign-up sheet that's being passed around. If you could please put your information on there, and if you have any questions for us, feel free to write them on the sign-up sheet, or there are some over here on the table, pieces of paper and pencils over there on the table next to the snacks. In case you feel inspired throughout the presentation and have a bunch of questions, feel free to jot them down and bring them to us, and we'd be happy to try to answer them. Another announcement from Mayday Books is that in the back of the store, posted right there, is a QR code. And the lot next door, the Cedar lot, you can validate your parking using the QR code, so you don't have to pay for parking. If you want to park and you don't have to purchase anything, Mayday Books is validating everyone's parking. And we want to say a special thank you to Mayday Bookstore for opening today on Sunday. Mayday, as you all know, has a wonderful collection of books, and some over here, right next to Stuart on the shelf, are specifically about Cuba and anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism within the Americas. So feel free to check out those books at the end of the presentation. So we're going to get started. Greg is from the Minnesota Cuba Committee. I'm Rebecca from the Solidarity Committee on the Americas, and this is Jackie from KFAI and Ask Me 24/74. And the three of us returned from Cuba over May Day, and we're really excited to be here to talk to you about some of our experiences.
First, we'd like to talk about some asks that we have of the community. Many people already know, but right now Cuba is in a very precarious situation, and we need to be organized more than ever before to counter the assault by the U.S. government, not only against the world, but specifically Cuba. And so, of course, we know that flights have been occurring around Cuba, doing surveillance to make sure they know every logistic possible for any kind of assault on the Cuban government. We have the aircraft carrier Nimitz, as well as Roosevelt Roads Air Force Base in Puerto Rico, active. The Nimitz is stationed right now in Kingston, Jamaica. And we have the announcements by the Trump administration that as soon as they're done with Iran, Cuba is next. One thing I thought was interesting, when we were in Cuba, we heard that the Iranian generals were saying we're holding off the United States from attacking Cuba. So very true. So anyways, I'm waking up every morning dreading turning on my internet connections and seeing something I don't want to see. So we want to work on one, if you're in another organization, we want to work on a rapid response network. And so that's why it's important that we get people signed up and that you legibly print your email address so that it's not going nowhere. But what we'd like to do is be setting up not only a rapid response network in case of any kind of military assault on Cuba, whereas we can contact the different organizations, and within your organization, you can contact a couple of friends that are in your organization and maybe one friend that's not in your organization. So we start to be able to create a rapid response tree that will bring up more people, because it's very important right now that we are able to build public response to these events so that we can start hopefully getting some media attention. Of course, you know that the media has basically only fed us the lies of the U.S. administration, and very few times are they interviewing people that are resisting the U.S. government's assault on Cuba in the media. I have to give credit, though, to a couple media stations who have been interviewing Miguel Diaz-Canel, as well as other high-level officials, Bruno Rodriguez, Fernando Di Casio, Jose Vital, and I encourage you to listen to those interviews, because those interviewees, those journalists, are asking some very bizarre, aggressive questions, and the Cubans have been able to make it very clear that Cuba is not a national security threat. So anyways, also we're looking for the build-up to the Week of Action, which is June 28th to July 4th. And that's when we want to either building groups together to create events like a material aid fundraiser, banner drops, pressuring the power brokers, Congress, the media, teach-in, picket lines, cultural events, etc. So those are immediate needs, and we're asking everybody to pitch in on this and to join us in these coming days to organize unity, because that's one thing that Fidel realized after the revolution, is that he had three major political groups that were divergent, and he needed to organize them. And in organizing them, he created a national unity. And that national unity is still the strength of Cuba and its ability to resist the most diabolical, evil blockade ever conceived in modern history. That unity is something that we will need to combat the domestic assaults on our rights, on the American people, such as the ICE occupation that occurred. And I believe that that is a good example for us to tie into and respond with, because right now, the world is watching Minnesota, to tell you the truth. Every place you go in the world, they know Minnesota. And when you go to classrooms in Cuba, if they know you're from Minnesota, they are going to raise their fists. The students are going to raise their fists in the air and shout, "ICE out, ICE out."
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, that was Greg spoke about some of our requests. The first one obviously was a rapid response participation, and that would be in any situation where the U.S. military attacks Cuba. And we are asking for both individuals and organizations to join in our rapid response action, to also, which would be showing up at the Federal Building downtown Minneapolis at 5 p.m. On the same day of any military attack, provided that the attack occurred before 3 p.m. in the afternoon. If the attack occurs 3 p.m. or after, then we would be doing a rapid response action at the Federal Building the following day at 5 p.m. And we'll get that information printed and sent out to community as well. And then the other request asked was material aid. We will be passing the hat or the basket, more so, later in the presentation. We are specifically collecting donations for Global Health Partners and Saving Lives Neonatal campaign. Many of us visited ELAM, the Latin American School of Medicine, and brought many donated medical supplies during our trip to Cuba recently. And we've seen the really grave need of particularly the most vulnerable in society in Cuba, babies and mothers who are really suffering because of Trump and Rubio's recent oil blockade against the island. As a matter of fact, Cuba, since 1959, Cuba had one of the lowest infant mortality rates in the entire world. It was record-breaking because of their robust public health care system. And unfortunately, since the oil blockade in January, and because of the over 6-decade-long blockade and placement of Cuba on the what's called the SSOT, the state sponsor of terrorism list, Cuba's infant mortality rate has now, increased to pretty much be on par with the United States at about 9 infants per 1,000. So that's why we're really focusing with Global Health Partners on material aid and medical aid for their neonatal campaign. And then the last request that we have is that folks consider traveling to Cuba. The Cubans love it when people from around the world, and particularly Americans, visit. They rely not only on tourism, but they are so excited and generous with sharing their friendship, their culture, and their love and fun with all of us when we travel there. And I think it goes to say that once you travel to Cuba and know Cuba firsthand, you will always love it. So our 3 asks are for medical aid, participation in any rapid response, and traveling to Cuba.
Do you want to go back and give more details? Like, Greg, do you want to talk more specifically about some of the arguments that the words we're hearing from the U.S. versus what's actually happening on the ground in Cuba?
Well, of course, probably one of the biggest things and the reason for the most severe attacks has been the oil blockade. And of course, right now, the administration, in fact, Marco Rubio, has been saying that there is no oil blockade. It's like, what? So, it's blatant lies, time after time. Does anybody have any questions about anything they've been hearing in the press about Cuba that they would like a discussion on? All right, go ahead.
Cubans are not going to send Raul Castro to the United States, are they?
No. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we saw there was the consistent turnout of mass numbers of Cubans demonstrating for support of Raul, as well as, against the blockade and yeah.
And those charges, the false murder charges against Raul Castro, who's a former president and hero of the Cuban Revolution, stemmed from 1996 when there was a terrorist group who was repeatedly unlawfully accessing Cuban airspace and doing a lot of really aggressive and violent things against the Cuban people. And those are pretty much trumped up charges used to continue and increase Trump and Rubio's maximum pressure campaign against Cuba right now. It's just another justification for all of these, not only the 6-decade-long blockade, embargo, and the placement on the SSOT, but also a lot of these new rounds of what they are calling secondary sanctions, things that have, been placed more recently, like on May 1st. There was another executive order from Trump, which essentially ensures the continuing strangulation of the island through preventing Cuba from being able to engage in any sort of financial transactions with other countries around the world.
Yeah, actually, any company that does business with Cuba, the government of Cuba, will not be able to have bank accounts in the United States, of course, the biggest capitalist market in the world, or one of them, and they may have their assets frozen without notification.
So they're going to stop Russia from doing anything, right?
Yes, of course. But, it's all connected. All the attacks around the world, it's all connected to a central issue of the rules-based order of the Western world, Europe and the United States and Canada, in saying that everybody's resources are basically up for grabs. If we can see them. Yeah. So of course we have we're in the grips of a world war, and Cuba represents a neighbor who's being attacked for no legitimate reasons whatsoever. And I think that the continued lies that the administration and the media is broadcasting further shows how out of grips they are with reality as well as morality, and that people are starting to see through it, but not having very much recourse for finding the truth. And more the reason why we need to keep up having events and speaking up.
And speaking of, we were talking earlier, like, so media, we're gonna kind of share, like, other organizations that are still planning out trips for the year, for the remainder of this year and 2027. But, like, we strongly encourage, like, Belly of the Beast is an amazing resource right now. They're doing amazing, like, short videos of Cubans telling their own history. And again, I think for all of us, it's also about how do we tell this story that will, to try and educate others in the U.S., our friends, our families, our colleagues about the importance of what's going on. And because one of the comments is that, besides the fact that, there is no oil blockade, they also are a failing state, which our witness is that, yes, they are under incredible pressure right now, but they are also incredibly resilient. So as hard as it is, they're still figuring out how to do some amazing things. And we can kind of keep going through our experiences and what we saw, but they are not failing. They are under-resourced, as we know, and they have such capacity. And so that's the other thing as we try and resist this current crisis. We also want to continue to build solidarity, education, opportunities for all or other people to give material aid and also travel.
Yeah, like Jacque mentioned, one of it's incredible to see how resilient and inventive the Cubans are, especially under such maximum pressure by the U.S. empire. One of the things they have recently developed was a second lung cancer treatment, and this comes amidst this horrible oil blockade. We're also seeing them advance in biotechnology, developing Alzheimer's medications, and also for type 2 diabetes, for folks at risk of for being amputated because of diabetes. Cuba has some of the most cutting edge biotech developments, and unfortunately we here in Minnesota cannot access those treatments because of the sanctions placed on Cuba. And they are more than willing to share their amazing research and development of medications with us. And that's part of the reason we encourage travel to Cuba, is to see with your own eyes just the wonders that can be achieved when we see a society that really values people over profit.
Yeah, when we were there, the Russian shipment of oil that had come in a couple of weeks before had been processed into the fuel needs that their system needed. And it was pretty remarkable how the electricity was back on, how things were being transported, maybe not at the capacity that it was a year ago, but things were still happening. They were, instead of buses, they had these electric powered, they're like ATVs with a little bed in the back that carried 6 to 8 people, and they would go down the major thoroughfares, picking people up. And so you just sit on the side of the road, and when they come by, they ask you, or you tell them where you want to go, and if they're going to the right place, then you get in, or you wait for the next one. And so those ATVs are being manufactured in Cuba. They also are manufacturing electric motorcycles. You see a lot of electric cars, a lot of electric solar panels. In fact, one of the campaigns that we had to raise money for solar panels here during the film festival were solar panels for maternity houses to keep them going in this time of crisis. Fruits, vegetables were getting to market. Meat was getting to market. All the markets were full. In Havana, where I was staying, I wasn't with a group. I was living in Havana with a Cuban family. And so, but regardless, there is still those people, those situations that are on the fringes, they are turning into, could have catastrophic ends because of lack of the simplest of things.
Did you want to explain that?
So, one of the things is I just wanted to show you this chart here. This is, so in the last 4 months, Cuba has been able to, with the solar farms that they got from China, they have a portion of them set up, but they have a large portion that isn't set up yet. And they jumped from solar supplying 6% of the total energy needs to 10% in 4 months. So by 2030, and they have a whole institution of sustainable energy. It's kind of pretty amazing, and it's situated right in the middle of Havana in a huge park. And so you can see that wind power by 2030, wind power 9%, solar 12%, biomass 15%, with 63% still being needed for oil generation.
Have you sent that out to us?
thermal generation. But by 2050, they hope to have a total sustainable energy system. So that's their plans. And worldwide economists that have studied Cuba say that if the blockade was lifted, Cuba would be prosperous in 5 years' time. Because of that focus on the mind power, biopharmaceutical, their inventiveness, they've been able to invent so many ways around the obstacles that the blockade has created. They have access to a lot of land. Unlike in this country where land costs are so high, Cuba's land is under community control, so they're able to give land to those who can produce it right away. And then, of course, they've got a beautiful island that can handle tourism. Their healthcare system, as we well know, they've been able to export tens of thousands. I think they've sent tens of thousands of doctors, nurses, educators, sports people around the world to aid other developing countries. And so that continues to be, instead of under the blockade and the oil blockade, the effect on the Cuban economy, instead of a brain drain, Cuba could be creating a brain resource for the developing world. And we see that especially with ALOM, the Latin America School of Medicine, where since it began, I think they taught 160,000 doctors from around the world in 120 different countries.
Love that.
And
To be doctors, yeah.
that's important.
Yeah, including the U.S., yes.
So U.S. Students are able to attend ELOM, the Latin American School of Medicine, for free. Unlike many of our medical school students here who leave with, upwards of $1 million in student debt, one can go to Cuba and be trained in the best medical school in the entire world. And one thing, when we visited ELOM on our trip and met with the director there, it was very clear that their medical approach is so much different than here in the United States when our healthcare is privatized. They really approach, patients as a full human being, and have a very extensive interview process with each patient to really get to know that patient as an individual and kind of figure out where the problems might originate as opposed to just treating particular symptoms. We, brought many suitcases full of medical supplies when we went on our trips, and they were immediately distributed throughout the hospital because it's just so difficult at this point in time to get basic items, even like syringes, sutures, even masks, rubber gloves, wet wipes, really basic things that you need for even standard healthcare procedures.
One of the things I heard the other day, in addition to the petroleum not being able to get in, the United Nations World Food Program is having difficulty in getting food into Cuba. The United States is making it difficult. The World Food Program.
Shows how desperate the United States is.
Getting food into Cuba. Greg said something very important that we should think about. If the blockade was lifted, what Cuba could do. And therein is the explanation. Therein is the explanation for the blockade. And we should say that, we should help the I get questions all the time from people. Why is the United States, why is our government doing this? That's a question that often comes up. And one thing some of you know my response, we have to begin with the fact that it's not our government.
Yeah.
We shouldn't confuse what we want with what we actually have. But this is an opportunity, I think, for us to do some political education. Notice that they never explain what their real objectives are. They always say economic reforms. That's a euphemism for capitalism. That's what they want to bring back to Cuba. And it means that we should take the opportunity to explain what life was like under capitalism. There's no better place to begin as a speech that Fidel gave. That first speech at the United Nations, the longest speech ever at the United Nations. It was in September 1906. That's when he met Malcolm X. And in great detail, he went into what life was like under capitalism. We should go back, read that, learn that, and to help to explain to people, indeed, what this is really about, and why they cannot say what their real intentions are. Their real intentions are to bring back capitalism. And go back to that speech that Fidel gave 2 years into the revolution. Why are they doing this? Because we made a socialist revolution right under their very nose. And they'll never forgive us for that. They'll never forgive that for that. And the fact that they can't explain it, the fact that they can't say that we want to bring capitalism back to Cuba, I think is very telling. It's telling about the state of the working class in the United States. How do you explain the working people? Oh, we want to bring capitalism back to Cuba. How that will, no. Yeah, we should see this as we make them pay a political price. We make them pay a political price to explain what their real motives are. And we should use this opportunity to educate ourselves, go back and read about the history of the Cuban Revolution.
Marcy.
So I wanted, Rebecca went with a group called Building Relations with Cuban Labor, which is really connected to capitalism, to unions in Cuba. And it would be really good if you could, as part of what you're talking about, talk about what you learned about working people and unions.
Sure, yeah. Thanks. Yes, I traveled with a delegation called Building Relations with Cuban Labor. And as some of you know, we have had approximately 123 resolutions passed in the United States for Cuba. Many of them have been from local labor unions, labor federations, and a few state federations of labor. And when we went, we were able to meet with the head of the CTC, which is the Centro de Trabajadores de Cuba, and which is a union, actually a large union structure, which contains and 90% I believe of all of the Cuban government are members of unions. Any person working at a workplace with more than 10 people in Cuba
what do you prefer?
is part of the union.
I'm not gonna say.
I
guess not. It's fine.
Inspiring to see in Cuba how democratically their unions operate. For instance, and many people here know that in 2022, the Cubans passed a family code, one of the most progressive family codes in the world, as a matter of fact. And now they are working on revising the labor code in a very similar manner. And what they did when educating members of society about the necessity to pass this family code is to work within their neighborhood organizations all the way up to the national government and go back and forth from the provinces to the neighborhood organizations, talking to your friends, talking to your family. Then the national government would take all of those suggestions into consideration and revise the family code until finally it was revised 25 times and then passed quite overwhelmingly in Cuba in 2022 with almost 80%. And that's what they're doing right now also with the labor code. And so it's a very, very democratic process. And workers are represented not only very locally, like we visited and with the union steward at the Hotel Nacional, which is one of the most famous hotels in Havana. And he was able to describe to us like what the grievance process looked like amongst various workers there, and how really didn't have the same sort of animosity that we see here in the United States with bosses and workers. And then that particular union within Hotel Nacional was connected to the larger labor structures as well. And they all help to contribute to the revision of the labor code as well. So it was very inspiring to be able to get to speak with so many workers who felt so like they had an actual voice in the democratic process in their workplaces, which is so different than what we're experiencing here in the US.
Yeah, I remember one time when we were at a university and we were talking to the students, and one of the students in our group who asked a question, well, how do you deal with when there's competing interests between the university administration and the students, like in this country. And the students, they looked at each other and, what do you mean? We are the administration. So there is a National Student Federation that represents the interests of the students, and they have a say in the administration of the universities and the schools, and they can review professors to see if they're up to par, up to meeting the needs of the students.
And just the fact that when we were there, it was May Day, May 1st, and the entire country, everyone had a holiday. It was not only a national holiday, but 500,000 people, even with this completely repressive oil embargo, still 500,000 people showed up in Havana to march for May Day. Workers, specifically workers. And 5 million workers around the country in all the provinces in Cuba showed up to, march and defend workers' rights all throughout the country. And here we're still, being forced to go to work and not recognize it as the legitimate workers' holiday that it is everywhere else.
Yeah. Well, I just have a question. I don't know if this is entirely relevant, but I'm just kind of curious. But when there's a workplace that has 10 or more people and there's a union and they're negotiating with their boss, I'm just curious, if there's a factory, who is the boss and who owns it, and do you know how they're picked? I know that there's been some economic reforms. I don't know exactly where private property and public property meet, but yeah, I'm just kind of curious more about the economics of their production.
Yeah. Does anybody want to do that?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, and you guys can go, in my experience with studying healthcare, and then I spent a lot of time with farmers, and so sort of the story I continue to hear is the majority of the country is unionized. So there is the majority of the property is owned, and some of the factories and businesses are owned by the government, and it just kind of depends. What is a certain factory a relationship between a foreign country and Cuba? So then that happens. But say example with the farmers, they're all farmers cooperatives across the country now. And so the way it works is that a farmer who wants to do a bigger farm that will provide food to the area or the nation in addition to themselves, they buy 20-year contracts. And so that farm is theirs with the understanding that they're, they have a job to do to provide a certain amount of food. And then at 20 years, if they've done a good job, they get the opportunity to renew the lease. So there has been a change. Come in. For, and the evolution, I think that over time of when we started seeing under Obama, the idea of there's some start of some small businesses and things like that. So it is this evolution of combination of state-owned, state meaning, the country being province-owned versus the workers owning it themselves with an understanding of a negotiation in that process. Just one example, the farm model.
Yeah, I mean, Cuba has labor laws, they have ownership laws, and so foreign companies can't outright own the resources. They can have interests in the benefits that they get from those resources, but they have to follow Cuba law as to how the workers are represented there, how much they can take from the, it's similar to any country that has private businesses, except for Cuba is saying if you want to have private investment in using our resources, that's fine, but you don't get to keep everything, you have to pay the taxes, you have to follow our labor laws, et cetera, et cetera. So they already are practicing capitalism, private business on a small scale. That's why they're having to create these new labor laws, because they have all these instances, they're slowly changing that. But they're having all these instances where, like, okay, now we've got 3 private businesses that want to get together to make, more of a cooperative. So how does those labor interests and those private interests mix to make justice, to make equality? So it's something that Cuba has been slowly integrating into their economy because of the difficulties that the blockade has been presenting. And so they already, private businesses, American businesses can do business in Cuba. It's not Cuba that's preventing it. It's the United States government that's preventing our own business people from investing in Cuba and helping the Cuban people.
And helping ourselves in
Right.
I mean, we got Minnesota farmers that would love to sell turkey to Cuba, and Cuba would love to buy their turkey, because right now they get it from Canada mostly. But the United States represents a market that's closer by. And we could go on and on, not only in the area of agriculture, but in the area of medical. Minnesota is a big medical avenue. And there's already interaction between Minnesota and Cuba in that area.
And it has been for many years.
At the university level, as well as nonprofit level. This is like a win-win, for both countries.
I think we had 2 questions, 1 and then 2.
Thank you. My question, I think it's related to what it came up for me when you were talking about the labor organizing, is like in the work you're doing and in trying to share with others about what's going on in Cuba, I'm wondering how you think about or kind of reconcile like the reality of the repression that is there for like that people can't speak out about against the government and by and large like you can't do that in the media like you can't have media. And I say that as somebody, I've been traveling to Cuba since 2021 and I went shortly after there was all the protests in July of 2021 and it was very clear how afraid people were to talk to me until they got to know me better. So I want to be clear, you don't have to convince me how awesome Cuba is. I can hold that, but that is like a reality that and I'm not like, and our country's great with that because clearly look what we just went through, but it is a reality that's coming up when I'm talking with people because they're asking me about it. And, you know, it's something that I really struggle with how to like reconcile or talk to people about because, you know, if what I'm saying makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I always think too, like, when I was there, we were able to visit what was called SANISEX, and it is the National Institute for Gender Equality, Gender-Based Violence, LGBTQ rights, etc.
Yeah.
And I looked, we got a lot of presentations about the 2022 Family Code, and I'm going to try to bring this back to your question.
Yeah.
And it was quite unpopular to some degree. When it was first introduced long before 2022.
Yeah.
And it was really impressive to me how the Cuban government particularly wanted to not just push this through, this family code, but really took the time, a lot of time, months and months and months, to go back and forth with the people in the community, with local officials, with those working in the schools and, you know, in a variety of other institutions to really do a robust public education campaign. And they had different things called jornadas, like different themes, in which they reached out to all sorts of different groups and people in society to educate them on the need for you know, an expanded notion of a family, whether that be LGBTQ families, single parents, grandparents, etc. And the people still came out and voted. It was approximately 70% voting in favor after going back and forth and revising this family code approximately 25 times. But there was, you know, 25% of the people in Cuba were voting against their own government. And they had no fear. They didn't come out to the polls and they were scared to place a no vote for the family code, even though, you know, so I don't think that from like what we've experienced, people are very open about talking, you know, about all of the wonderful things in Cuban society, but also all of the challenges as well. And they did not feel, you know, afraid to discuss those issues. And it was more of a problem solving, oftentimes were problem solving conversations. So, yeah.
I have another comment too, because so this was my 7th trip to Cuba, so I've been there before as well. The last time though was not since 2014, so it was during the Obama administration. I went initially in the early 2000s when Fidel was still alive, and then saw the transition to Raul, Obama, you know, and then now. And so here's what I'll say, which because I consider myself, I mean, I'm very pro the Cuban Revolution and socialism and the programs. It has been, and they will admit it, like all the people that we talk to, energy, tourism, you know, there are skirts and stuff. But a lot of times it's all because they have to readjust to whatever bad thing the U.S. is doing to them. So I saw a huge change between 2014 and this year. You know, I'd say in 2014 is maybe the most prosperous it had been in recent times. You know, and now it's just like their life is so hard right now. And so I keep thinking what I would do, like we're obviously, a lot of us are complaining right now about this administration very vocally. And so, but it's interesting because I had 2 side conversations with some of my friends. Now, both sets of friends are in their 40s. So their parents 100% believe in the revolution because they were young children before the revolution started. So they knew what it was like before. And then, and of course, all the places we visited, they very much believe in the revolution. And one thing that we saw at the May Day Festival is like 6.5 million people. How many ever people are living in Cuba right now? 10, 11. So they recommitted to the revolution. So basically they're saying like we will stand up and stand by our country. But there are some that are not. These 2 groups of friends. Like literally one of them said, I don't want to be president. But they're so misinformed about, and I get it because it looks like things are amazing here, and relatively speaking, it is for the majority of U.S. people. But they don't understand that. And what I said to them is like, I get what you're saying. I mean, to them, they both want to be small business. They're groups of friends, right? Yeah. And they're mad about all the taxes that they have to pay, like very high taxes. But then I started explaining to them, it's just like, but you have health care. I have to now pay $2,300 a month to cover my health insurance, right? Mm-hmm. And then even if you do have the health insurance, you avoid going because of all the, so they don't understand how much that stuff costs. And they're also idealizing, and maybe we're also idealizing, but we know the stuff that is actually working. If we can just get out of their way and let all these countries that want to trade and work with them, like I totally believe that they would turn prosperous so quickly. So yes, there are people that are very unhappy, and I'm trying to hear them and understand, and I get it. But I'm just trying to help them understand that what they hope for with the U.S., especially with this administration, is very scary. So anyway.
Yeah. So this is all. I mean, this is all part of a psych operation. So what we're thinking, the instances that you brought up. You're thinking about a U.S. citizen in a country that we don't have anything. We're not under attack. Okay? They are under attack. So they have to defend something. So the blockade is meant to be an invisible weapon. So they don't see it. It's invisible. Yeah. So how do you understand something that's invisible? And then you've got all these internet funded by the United States State Department that are constantly bombarding your cell phone with notifications, and you're going to get them in this country if you go on there. El Toque is going to be some of the top ones. Periodico Cubano is going to be Dime Cuba. Cyber Cuba is a big one. Diario de Cuba. So ADN Cuba, CubaNet. These are some of the top ones, and they come out of different countries. Southern Florida, Spain, Panama, constantly bombarding them, telling them a story, but they leave out the blockade. So it's a constant confusion, and of course, Cubans want to get on the internet. They want to be connected, and actually, that was a reason why one of the first things that Obama negotiated. In fact, it was a condition. You have to let in our internet company. You can't have your own. It's going to be set up on our system.
How do they take that?
And so that's what's happening. So July 21st, that was an example of this psych operation where all these, so they set up these bots and they bombarded the internet with all these, these notifications, SOS Cuba, get out in the streets, blah, 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 blah. They created that whole kind of thing, again, in line with operations from the U.S. Embassy in Cuba. There's agents, CIA agents, military attaches are at every embassy in the world, but especially those where we're trying to undermine their government, that go out in communities and use all kinds of means. Yeah, actually paying people or giving them. So I talked to one guy who was in jail for illegally trying to immigrate to the United States. I mean, he was a balsero, so he's taking a raft. And it was at the time when the United States, this was like Bush administration, they were saying, you know, if you allow all these people to be coming to the United States, that on rafts, you know, illegally entering the United States, because that was another time they were against immigration. You know, we're going to say that you're a failed country, and so that's a time that, you know, they were bringing up all the instances that Cuba's building biochemical weapons. And so the Cuban government caught these guys. They violated the law of illegally trying to immigrate to the United States. They were in jail. The Spanish embassy came to the jail. He told the guy, if you get the list of all these people in the jail, have them get the list of all the people in here. And the next time I come and visit you, I'll get that list. Then we're going to say these are political prisoners. These are people that were in jail for all kinds of criminal offenses. And so so that's what they did. They said all these people are political prisoners. And so once he got out of jail, and then they said, we'll give you a free immigration pass to Spain, and then you're going to get a free immigration pass to the United States. And so that's exactly what happened. And why did I talk to him in Cuba? Because once he got into the United States, and this is common for Cubans who immigrate to the United States right now, and they say, oh, we're seeking asylum, political asylum for prosecution. The most common thing that Cubans do once they get political asylum in the United States is they go back to Cuba. And they bring money back to their families. And this guy, he was like it was his second marriage. He had a couple kids. Now he was getting papers to bring his wife and his 2 kids back to the United States. And he told me he was getting to the front of the line because of his work. So, and this is just one instance. There's like hundreds of instances of this going on in Cuba. And again, what Cuba's defending is that healthcare system, is that education system, is that family code. When people are speaking up against opposing the government, that's what they're speaking up against, is changing Cuban society. I mean, if we had a foreign country that was doing that in this country, I mean, we wouldn't stand for it. We don't even stand for,
We have you need the question or somebody in the back, I believe?
I thought you were coming to me.
Yeah, Kathleen and then Sandy. Thank you.
Me? Yeah.
What's your question?
Your time. Okay, I heard that private businesses could get oil, but not give it to the government. Is that something that's happening?
I don't know, but I will say this. So I paid very much attention when we were there. Like, I was there for 2 weeks. I swear to God, I only saw 2 open gas stations. So imagine this, for around the US, all the gas stations closed. So there is a way, there is a black market, absolutely. So there are ways, I don't know how they get the fuel, but then they're selling it for like $14 a liter, which would be $50 per gallon. So again, there is a black market that way. So I don't know if some of that is what's happening, but I saw 2 open gas stations right after the Russian oil tanker. So I don't know what is happening.
I think it was the offer that the U.S. made.
It was
that
an
you turned
offer.
down. Yeah.
No, actually, that's right. Private businesses can get,
Their own oil.
yeah, they can get, no, it's not oil, it's gas, because they can't process oil. Private businesses can't. So they can get, like, private businesses that the U.S. embargo has a hole in it. So in order to create this private business entrepreneurship, the United States hopes that those people who are able to benefit from private businesses will have influence in those communities and therefore become a counter agent to the government itself. But again, those private businesses do not pay for education. Private businesses don't pay for health care. They don't pay for solid waste management. They don't pay for water systems. And so what happens is they have these plastic containers where you can get gas. But it's small, plastic. It's like probably as big as this seating area right here of a plastic container. So somebody buys it down there and they sell it to people based on the market. It's not enough to give to the government or anything like that, but it keeps them operating, and then people think, oh well, private businesses is the answer to us getting gas, not the government. So this is diabolical. How this whole system works, and the CIA and Langley, they plan this out.
Greg.
I just wanted to say, that's true. Totally true. The blockade, the U.S. has been trying to overthrow the Cuban Revolution ever since it was made. All the presidents, every presidential administration, not just Trump, Obama, Biden, all of them, with different tactics at different times, but they've all, their focus is to get rid of the Cuban Revolution. So that's true. But I would also like to say, first of all, I've been to Cuba only twice. Once in 1981, which was completely different because it was before the special period, before the loss of Soviet aid and so on. And then I went back in 2014, and so I saw how much it had changed from 81 to 2014. It was pretty stunning to me. And the impact of the concessions that the Cuban government had to make to the market economy in order to survive, and the examples of social inequality that come from that, because that's how the market works, And so I heard people complain about all kinds of stuff. So I didn't feel like people were afraid to complain to me at all. I do think that, and the Cuban government will be the first to admit, and they have admitted, that they haven't always dealt with protest and dissatisfaction in the best possible way. And Miguel Diaz-Canel talked about that. And so, there's been an effort to be more, to be more accessible and be more, have discussions and try to bring people along. But it's not a paradise. It's not perfect. And we don't help them by presenting it as such, because it's not perfect and it's not entirely because of U.S. blockade and the U.S. hostility. But, all in all, the reason we support Cuba is because their revolution puts human needs before profit and mobilizes society for human solidarity and not for personal gain. And those are values that we fight for and want to have in this country as well. But in no way is it a perfect paradise.
Yes. Question. Thank you, Sandy.
I've been to Cuba 4 times. In 1980, 95, 2017, and 2018, I think. And I don't know whether I will get back there again or not. But in any case, if you are going to get people to contribute, it's probably best that you do it soon, because people are leaving. And and I simply don't want to leave without making a contribution. So I'm urging that
Oh yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to pass the basket around right now. We did get an announcement from Craig at Mayday Books, who we love very much. This is not for Mayday. He said all donations should be going to Cuba, and we will be sending all donations specifically to Global Health Partners for their neonatal campaign. That's what this is for. Thank you.
Another one to contribute if people don't have check.
Yes, actually, there is, I can write down any of the information that where you can go online to contribute. Yeah, thank you.
And the week of action, if you guys, I don't know if you have some of those dates available today.
We have, and we're still kind of collectively trying to get suggestions also on what various organizations or individuals would like to do for the week of action. So that will be from June 28th to July 4th. And I know that people wrote down their contact information on the sheet, and we'll be reaching out that way as well. But we would love suggestions if you would rather see something like political education, a banner drop, a picket line, a movie showing, whatever, I know that it would be best to turn out as many people as possible, so we would really value whatever suggestions you have for that as well.
We all, meaning Minneapolis, have a No War on Cuba banner yet? Should you a banner drop?
We are in the process of making some. Because this is thank you for that, mentioning that. There is a campaign right now, both the Solidarity Committee on the Americas and the Minnesota Cuba Committee are part of coalitions called the National Network on Cuba and U.S.-Cuba Normalization. And the National Network on Cuba we have launched a brand new campaign called Choose Peace, No War on Cuba. So we're making signs, and hopefully we'll have a banner soon for a banner drop, but we would love help.
Be happy to participate in that.
Yeah, thank you.
And the other question is how the Minnesota delegation, sorry I haven't been here for years, but so I don't know, is the whole Minnesota delegation, congressional delegation, signing on to all the legislation, the end of blockade, war powers resolution, all that? Is there
Why don't you go ahead? I'll
push
try.
them further?
I'll get
Yes,
Is there
and
leadership on that?
thank you for that question. It's a really good question. We are doing, we have been lobbying with our elected officials. Recently lobbied with Senator Klobuchar's office, and she, surprisingly, we made much more headway than we anticipated. She agreed to not only support the War Powers resolution, but also co-author that legislation.
That's a big thing.
Which is a very big thing, yes. And and we're continuing with our lobbying efforts, and hope to. We also will be reaching out not only to our Democratic elected officials, but also to the Republicans, because they need to hear from us about not only the War Powers Resolution, but also the legislation introduced both in the House and Senate, the Wyden and McGovern bills, because those address ending the embargo altogether.
Can I add
Carla
something
and
to
Marcy?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, maybe it was the same thing Marcy was going to say. If you want to share the video of the meeting, it's been streamed on SCOTA, Minnesota Cuba Committee, and Veterans for Peace. And then it'll go up on YouTube for a more permanent location, and we'll send that link out to he's signed up for their.
I wanted to make an addition to what Rebecca was saying about the lobbying that we've been doing. So basically, if any of you live in Representative McCollum's, Representative Morrison's, or Representative Craig's district, would you see one of us? So we're going to be sending a letter in the next few days, and it would be really good to have that. Oh, Ilhan Omar has always been a strong advocate for Cuba, so we just sent her you can send her a thank you letter for being such a good advocate for Cuba. But it's really important that right now the House is really important, and we need people to sign on to this letter. So if you live in any of those districts, please tell one of us.
I would say that the Congress people are hiding behind the cloak of democracy.
Whatever.
And that the Congress people, they hide behind the votes that they make on the floor, but they don't make any public statements. And as representatives of us, they should be. The majority of Minnesotans are against what the U.S. government is doing. They should be making a public statement to that fact, especially in the light of the deaths of so many people in this past year, recently with this oil blockade, the deaths of so many people that could be alive, so many newborn infants that could be alive. This is a genocide. It's a slow motion genocide. It's the same thing that's going on in Gaza. And one of the things that we need to be making we need to make connections on is the genocide in Gaza is the same thing that's going on in Cuba.
And Helen had a question?
I just want to say, I think it's it's a very good crowd here today. I think it's very important in this National Week of Solidarity that we do something collectively with all the organizations. I don't know if it's a band, like she said, a banner off. It's something that can bring out people that we can then also try and get some press. At least the three up in front I know spoke on the radio yesterday, and Sandy Sherman tried to get press for this thankless action we did last Wednesday. But I think if we put the pressure, this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And I think the question of people, I just had some relatives visit from California, I would say are apolitical. But they said the U.S. better not go into Cuba like they did in Iran. You know, people don't want to go to war.
Right.
So I think we have a real opportunity and tremendous appeal, and the fact that there's a number of organizations here, I think it bodes well for being part of these national actions, and we should all plan to figure out how to participate.
Thank you. Yeah, and Helen is definitely correct. We already have multiple local organizations, Veterans for Peace, Local Chapter 27, National Lawyers Guild, Witness for Peace, Several other groups have already agreed
Democratic
to.
Socialists, Twin Cities
Yeah.
Democratic Socialists.
Yeah, DSA, a lot of organizations understand the importance of having rapid response in case of further escalation. So if you are part of one of those organizations, or even just an individual, we really would love and encourage your participation.
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk more after. And I think I've seen some people here probably at the salsa dancing, but I just feel like I appreciate the focus on like joy and resistance, because I think right now like there's so much nihilism and defeat that like as much as we can center like those themes. But yeah, I think I've seen some of you guys salsa dancing. There's like a big community here, and I think it would just be cool to get like some music or dance in an event with Cuba too.
That's a great suggestion, and it goes aligned with what all of us, have experienced throughout our year's worth of travel to Cuba, which is even in the most repressive, conditions imposed by the U.S. empire. Cuba is still, very dedicated to investing in its children, in its public schools, in its culture, dance, the arts, music. It's really helps in the resiliency. So I love the suggestion of bringing in dance and music and the arts for our week of action too, and also ongoing actions, but for the week of action, upcoming week of action as well.
Yeah, that's one thing I saw in Cuba was culture. All the time. All kinds of activities. Poet readings, classical music events, salsa bands, etc. They constantly, are making sure that culture is part of the resilience of the revolution, and it should be in ours too.
I think there are 2 questions in the back. Yes.
I was just going to suggest we also keep in mind July 26th. It's an important date for the revolution, and maybe we could find a bigger venue, a church or someplace where we could combine some of these suggestions and reach out to the unions too, try to get more people to come out, join together.
Yes, thank you. That's a great suggestion. July 26th, the anniversary of Moncada. So also a very good suggestion. I think we probably just have time for like maybe 2 more questions, and then we should probably wrap it up. Charlie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering how the refugees from Cuba have changed. And if they are changing, is ICE targeting them more now? Because they're not as anti-revolution, but they're just economic moves.
Well, that's a good question. When I was in Cuba, I was talking to some of the workers whose family members been moved to Florida, and then were targeted by Trump and were abducted by ICE and held in detention for several months. And they immediately went back to Cuba for safety after being released from ICE detention. And there is a real understanding that what has occurred in Minnesota in terms of the demonization of our elected officials here, just like it's the same thing that's happening in Cuba, with the actual physical violence of ICE operatives here in Minnesota is very similar to the physical violence being imposed on Cuba right now with U.S. aircraft carriers off its shore, as well as the, obvious
money.
Yeah, the economic, effects of having a federal occupation in our city and state is very similar to the blockade against Cuba as well. So there's a lot of similarities that we can make locally, under federal occupation here in Minnesota that are very similar to what the Cubans are facing on a much, much larger scale. Joan, do you want to take over the last question?
I can't remember the last question was. But anyway, I just want to thank all of you for taking your time to try to educate all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you
what we
all.
can do.
Yes.
video slides that you've been showing, is that available like to download or to see on the internet? The ones from the computer?
Yeah, we can for sure send them out to the different.
I could put them on the end of the video as a,
You know.
Yes, thank you, yes.
Yes, we'll make it work.
We'll put it online on the SCOTA, Facebook, the Solidarity Committee on the Americas, the Minnesota Cuba Committee, Facebook, as well as Veterans for Peace.
There was one question that didn't come verbally, but people wanted an answer to the accusation lately by the U.S. government that Cuba has a secret government within their government called GESA. So the GESA institution, what it is that it's an institution that oversees many types of commerce within Cuba that has to deal with outside entities in order to get resources. So in the 1990s, when the socialist bloc fell apart, Cuba had to implement, they no longer had all these other countries that they could trade with and get resources. All of a sudden, they were all alone. And what they had was a U.S. government. You can think of it as this, as the giant hacker. And that hacker wanted to get all the information that you had in order to deny resources, in order to steal from your economic well-being. GESA was created in order to be counter, to be that, what do they call it? Safe wall. Firewall. GESA was created to be that firewall to keep the hacker from stealing the resource. That's how you can think of GESA. But the United States, again, uses it as a lie to try to create another reason why Cubans, should defy their government or just say, talk about GESA in that way, but really the
should give you a ride home.
reason that it's created is again to break down Cuba's defending their country, their socialist revolution, their freedom, yeah. It's an acronym, GAESA. It's an acronym.
I did pass out Cuban flags to people. Thank you so much. Please wave them with pride. They came from the Solidarity Committee on the Americas. And the question, yes, May Day Books is open. People are able to browse, to buy books if you would like to. And we also just wanted to say a huge thank you to Mayday, who is always gracious, accommodates us, and has the best environment because there's so much to look at and see.
I'm gonna put in a few more of these videos before I send it out. This was from my last day. It was a small neighborhood sort of guitar. Like everyone does this for free. So this is one of the songs that, and they're doing ukuleles here.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so you get a lot of emails. So do they send
We certainly get better.
Those are all the Canadians that I are you doing this also? I'm not like all this, but I have one of the squishy Are you in the school system?
Can I exit with a message?
Oh yeah, no problem.